Another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast. Brandon, I watched NXT this week, and I came to an unfortunate quarantine conclusion. I wanted to look like Roderick Strong this whole time, but because I've been stuck inside eating this whole time, I think I more or less resemble Cal O'Reilly. What do you think?
I would say Kyle O'Reilly for sure.
Yes. I noticed Cal O'Reilly this week on NXT is somebody that I said, that's a wrestler, I guess, body type that I can get behind. Speaking of wrestlers and body types, a lot of male wrestlers talking about girls' body types in an inappropriate way, speaking out, and much, much more. The Heel to Face podcast starts right now.
So silence your cell phones, hold your applause, and tune into the truth.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Getting beat up by 9 guys in Syracuse, to me, there's not a whole lot of shame in.
From the 315 to the world, this is the Heel to Face podcast.
The cream of the crop! Wow, man, freaked out!
Follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Heel to the Face.
I said, are you ready?
From Armory Square in downtown Syracuse, New York, let's send it now to Brandon and Jared.
Bad luck seems to be my middle name. They might as well tag me up with my buddies from Syracuse.
So this is another edition of the Heel to the Face podcast, the final one for the month of June. I am K-Rock Jared. That's where you can find me on social media. I am joined, as always, with Brandon the Icebreaker Clements. You can find him on social media at Icebreaker21 and the show on Twitter at Heel to the Face podcast. We're on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, and visually right now on YouTube as we're connecting for what seems to be the third month in a row via Skype, but we're still here via Skype, and it's working out for us, and we got a lot to talk about. We'll start with the big positive this week. We'll start with the finale of The Undertaker, Chapter 5. WWE.com, they dusted off those 2017 Thank You Taker shirts. They put them back up on Shop Zone. Brandon, is Taker all done?
Yes. After watching the final episode this past week, I think he is. I think he just seemed more at peace than I've ever seen him in many retirements, I guess. He seems like he's at peace. I think when the thing that got me was AJ Styles, that whole dynamic there. If it wasn't for AJ, I don't think Taker would have came back at all. But the way Taker kind of came out and said it, he's like, AJ's the best wrestler going right now. And he's the only guy right now that I would come out of retirement for, and he had the match. So I don't think there's anybody for him that is another dream match at this point. I mean, you've seen the other dream matches, quote unquote, and the Goldberg match was awful. He could have been paralyzed there. They kept showing that where he almost got spiked on his head. So there's no more dream matches for him. I mean, he's got too much to lose at this point. So I think
there's still a dream match out there for us fans, at least. I think his name is Sting. But Brandon, I'll ask you the question. I want him to be done.
The thing with Sting is, I don't think he can be cleared again. I think he's done. I think his injuries are pretty bad at this point. And let's be honest. Do we want to see 50-year-old plus Sting, 50-year-old plus Taker at this point at their advanced ages with their bodies the way they are? I don't. I think let's just leave it alone and let's just not do it.
So you are in favor of Undertaker being all done?
Yes. After watching that last episode, it's really swayed me in that direction. I think that special, the more I think about it, I think that special was made, especially at the end, as an Undertaker, his way of retiring to the public. He wanted to do it on his terms, so he kind of announced it on the final episode. So I think he's done. I really do.
As a fan, I would like to selfishly see one more match, but after watching the documentary, the thing The Undertaker kept reiterating is that every time he gets in the ring in front of people, he gets that, let's just say he's chasing that dragon again, and then it turns into a bunch of matches. So I said earlier this week when I was a guest on ESPN Radio in Syracuse that if Taker wants to come back for 5 more matches, I don't want that. If Taker comes back and has to wrestle more and more and more, then I think he should be done now. But if he can legitimately hold himself to one more match in front of people and then really be done and not get the itch to wrestle more, I would like to see that. I would like to see him wrestle because I know that what you've said and a lot of people have said that that scripted Boneyard match was a good way to utilize Undertaker at his age. The problem with it is that it wasn't in front of people. It was in an unfortunate circumstance. It's in front of a WrestleMania that, in my eyes, has got one of the worst of all time. It shouldn't even be called WrestleMania for the fact that Undertaker was wrestling in a abandoned lot. I mean, that's fine for Roddy Piper and Goldust back in WrestleMania 12, but even in those matches, let's look at the House of Horrors match and all these other. The key element is they still finished the matches in front of fans in the ring. This one was just a complete, silly, House of Horrors kind of thing, and that's not how I want to see Undertaker go out. I look at it like this: if Undertaker can give us at next year's WrestleMania one-on-one with Kane in what would be announced as both of their final matches, I would be interested in that.
Yeah, I like the way you said that. Kane and Taker. I would like to see that, but I don't know. I think he's at peace. It just seemed like you see these athletes over the years. You see guys that you can tell they still have the itch. I think he's at peace now. I mean, they were showing him out there fishing, and he just seemed like that's what he wants to do the rest of his life, is just chill and spend time with his family. I think that's very important to him at this point, and being outdoors. He's an outdoorsman. He loves the fish and hunt and all that. So I think he's done. I really, selfishly, I agree. I'd love to see him one more match in front of fans at WrestleMania next year. And that's a great opponent, Kane. Get him to retire as well. I just don't see it. I think Taker's done. And I could be wrong. I mean, we've said many times, like, when is he going to retire? I think this is it. I really do.
The one aspect I would kind of find negatively if he did come back for one more match again is that he didn't necessarily say he was done at this event, but it turned into essentially Taker's retirement. I mean, you obviously see now that WWE selling Thank You Taker shirts, and Sports Illustrated and Bleacher Report are pretty much all coming out. Madison Square Garden even donned a Thank You Taker on their video board outside. So I don't want to see that all for naught, because the problem is it turns into what we see in the music business, where someone has a farewell tour and people turn out and they go see the farewell tour, but then we find out that it's not their farewell tour and they keep going. And by the time that it actually becomes their farewell tour, it's like the boy who cried wolf. We don't care anymore. So I don't want to see Taker come back, actually wrestle his final match, but then not get the respect he deserves, because people are saying, yeah, he's probably lying. So after he actually does wrestle his final match, he pretty much just fades away into, like, we're thinking he's coming back, and then he just never does.
Yeah, no,
I would rather see a good, proper send-off.
I agree with you there. I think in this aspect, I think it is going on in his terms. I really do. I mean, he's not laying his gear in the middle of the ring like he did at WrestleMania before. He's sitting in front of a camera doing this, this documentary that it was a 5-part series almost. It was like the WWE version of what the Last Dance was with Michael Jordan for basketball. So for wrestling fans, it was great to see the whole thing. So I think for him, I think it was the perfect way to do it. I think he's at peace with it. I don't think he's coming back. I really don't think so.
Well, he did say one thing, and that is, if Vince is ever in a pinch, and let's be serious, Vince always comes up with a reason that he needs The Undertaker. We could have a star-studded WrestleMania, and yet he would still say, we need you to face Heath Slater. Like, that's kind of why The Undertaker is still wrestling, because to say, if Vince is ever in a pinch, and to think, when has Vince McMahon ever been honest? When has he ever really been in a pinch and only called up The Undertaker in extenuating circumstances? I mean, has he really been in a pinch all these times? Did he really need Undertaker to face John Cena? Would WrestleMania 34 have crumbled if he didn't face John Cena? Would WrestleMania 33 have crumbled if he didn't face Roman Reigns? Like, so this whole thing of, well, if Vince McMahon needs me, Vince McMahon will always say he needs you. Okay, so you can't say that. You can't say, well, if Vince McMahon says he needs me, because that just opens the door to Vince McMahon to just, it's literally like an abusive boyfriend, and then you're like, well, if he says I'm sorry, you're like, no, you have to do it yourself. You can't wait for this person to just keep coming up with nonsense to dictate what you do. And I think that's kind of why The Undertaker's wrestled so, if Vince McMahon was honest, he probably would have just stopped booking The Undertaker. He would have said, listen, this guy, if he can't make up his retirement on his own, I'm going to have to stop booking him. But the fact that he keeps booking him shows that, I mean, he's pretty selfish himself. So I could definitely see Vince McMahon reaching out to The Undertaker and saying, hey, you know, how about this? And so Undertaker needs to learn to say no.
And I think he will. I think I bet you what'll happen is we get around Royal Rumble season like we normally do and get ready for WrestleMania. I think you're right. I think Vince is going to reach out. And I think Taker this time is going to say, I'm done. I think he's at peace. I think he's done, and I'm happy for him. And if we see him, the next time we see him is, you know, in a particular ceremony, I'm cool with that.
It's very curious to see if we see him, you know, at a particular ceremony, because we still have yet to induct this year's Hall of Fame class. And so moving on from The Undertaker, we talk, you know, the hope was we would be in front of a live audience again, maybe even celebrating the Hall of Fame ceremony in Boston at SummerSlam. But it seems like we've had quite the setback. A lot of WWE talent and personalities. Renee Young has been diagnosed with COVID. Kayla Braxton has just announced that she has got COVID for the second time. One of the producers in the back has publicly announced he has COVID. So what do you make of this? Should WWE shut down? What should WWE's, I guess, approach be now, let's say, for the month of July?
I think at this point, I mean, we're seeing spikes again. That's not even just in WWE standards. That's across the board. In other states, there's issues going on right now. Like if you go out to North Carolina right now and you come back to New York, you gotta self-quarantine or you can get in trouble. So like it's a pretty serious matter. So my timeline would be like this. I think they should shut things down for 14 days. So we're missing a Raw, we're missing 2 Raws, 2 SmackDowns, 2 NXTs, and you know what they should do, just so they can have something on TV, is have like a Royal Rumble flashback on Raw, have a WrestleMania flashback for SmackDown, maybe do an NXT takeover, like a rematch, do something like that. So let's get everything healed up. I think everything should just get shut down for 14 days, and then let's just get it all out of our system. And everyone that's had it is now they beat it, they're quarantined, and then they're not going to infect anybody else. That's just me. I don't know if it'll be a whole month of July, but I would say half the month. I would say let's shut things down, and then let's see how things go for a couple weeks, and then we'll kind of go from there. It honestly, this whole COVID thing, you got to take it day by day. You can't just put it out, a month in advance. You really can't at this point, because now that we see Kayla Braxton got it for the second time, which I didn't even know you could. I mean, I'm not a doctor by any means, but when I heard she had it for the second time already, the alarms kind of went off. Like, all right, this could be problematic. So I think quarantine's the way to go for at least a 2-week stretch.
Yeah, well, we got WWE NXT's answer to Fyter Fest coming up for at least the next 2 weeks. Great American Bash. Do you think that they should pre-tape those? Do you think that they should go ahead and do those live? What do you think the approach should be for those 2 NXT events?
I think they should get them taped, get them done, and and get them ready to roll, and that there you go. There's your 2 weeks right there. You get 2 weeks, you get some quarantine done. You know what I mean? So tape them ahead of time.
I mean, personally, I thought this should have been the approach in March. Vince McMahon has still stuck by. He spoke publicly that, he felt this obligation to give the fans entertainment, yada, yada, yada. But, I mean, I'm a fan, and I think that they should have done this a long time ago. I don't know how many fans out there truly, I guess, this whole time needed new live WWE content versus, old Royal Rumbles, old pay-per-views. I would have been fine because here's the thing. I mean, maybe it's my age. Maybe it's because I'm older. I can't speak for 12-year-olds out there, but we haven't had sports. We haven't had baseball, basketball, football, any of these sports in this entire time. And yes, it has kind of sucked, but at the same time, we've all survived. And more importantly, I think that I'm kind of glad that we haven't had it if we can't have it the right, normal way.
Exactly.
So I personally think that WWE should have probably been off the air this whole time. AEW, though, has said, and somebody in the inside know has said, that AEW is currently on a contract in which if they have stopped producing weekly content like AEW Dynamites, their contract could, just by missing 1 week of television, be canceled. And apparently that is a pretty stern thing. For example, the people that are putting on the show don't take that lightly. Don't take the fact that they can be canceled very lightly. And AEW is not WWE. They don't have a lot of different avenues, house shows, pay-per-views. They just have Dynamite. Yeah. So that's their whole – that owning AEW would just be owning Dynamite. So that would be a big deal for them.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just say this. AEW across the board has done a really good job. I have to say this. The whole thing with Mox, fantastic on his part with everything going on. And now we later find out that secondary source is his wife. I think he did a great job letting Tony Khan know, like, hey, I don't want to take the chance. Doc's, then he talked to the doc, and the doc said you're quarantined for 2 weeks. So it's good timing because then he should be back for Fyter Fest so we can face Brian Cage. So I think he's doing the right thing, and AEW is doing it the right way across the board. QT Marshall was supposed to be on Dynamite this week, but he wasn't. Which, by the way, I have to say this: I'm actually glad that SCU was facing FTR versus QT and Dustin Rhodes. That's just me. I thought that match was really good.
Well, speaking of the Rhodes family, speaking of the competition of AEW NXT, do you think it's a coincidence that up against Fyter Fest, AEW's 2-night, 2-week free pay-per-view, that all of a sudden announced during NXT's broadcast last night that there'll be a 2-night, 2-week WWE NXT free pay-per-view in place of NXT's weekly show entitled what Dusty Rhodes apparently made famous back in the day in his pay-per-view that he stakes claim to, the Great American Bash. Do you think that's a coincidence at all?
Oh, come on. Let's be real. I think we all know the answer to that question. It's kind of an obvious answer.
Which part do you think is the answer to Fyter Fest? The fact that they're having a 2-week pay-per-view, or do you think that the fact that they called it Great American Bash? Do you think at all that they met any malicious intent doing the Great American Bash? Because that is still something that kind of has come around this time of year. Great American Bash was a late June, July event.
Of course it was. It was a play. Of course it was. We all know the history behind Great American Bash. I mean, of course it's. I don't know if it was. It's. I would say it's kind of a little jab at the Rhodes at Cody and Dustin and AEW. I definitely think it was. I don't think they were planning on doing a 2-week, pay-per-view, a 2-night, 2-week pay-per-view like AEW has or is going to do. So yeah, it's definitely WWE's doing this to kind of try to stick it to AEW. And here's the other thing: if they left it as a normal NXT versus Fyter Fest, those 2 weeks they would have gotten destroyed even worse than they have been in the viewership. Let's be honest. NXT has not beaten AEW, and I don't think ever. To be honest,
well,
I think
last night, this week they did.
They did.
They did, and they beat them pretty substantially this week as well with the Keith Lee, Finn Balor, in the triple threat. Yeah, for the North American Championship match there.
Those numbers came out today.
Yep. So NXT did beat AEW this week, probably because of the fact that a lot of people knew that next week is Fyter Fest. That was already pre-advertised. This Great American Bash thing was literally just advertised last night. So the fact that people thought that this was essentially a go-home show for Fyter Fest versus an NXT event where you had a triple threat match where the winner faces Adam Cole for the championship. I mean, that match specifically was already pre-announced, the fact that it was going to happen on July the 8th. This whole Great American Bash event itself is all brand new.
Well, what was the numbers? Because I haven't seen them yet. I mean, I know they came out today. Was it like a couple 100,000 different? Was it a big number?
If I can pull the numbers, I will try to find the numbers. I know it was a substantial victory for. That's what I've read. I don't have the exact numbers right now.
I don't think you have to go back and look at the ratings, but if I remember correctly, I don't think NXT has beaten AEW up until today then, or up to last night's show. Because it's been close, like they've been tied, just essentially like a few thousand fan difference. But I think AEW's won all along, if I'm not mistaken.
So I got the numbers in front of me: 786,000 NXT to AEW's 633.
So they kind of flip-flop this week because that's normally how it is every week, the other way around.
They both did very good. I feel like in the past weeks it's been 600 to 500 or even sometimes 500 to 400. So the fact that they together, because normally together they draw about 1 million and it's 5 to 4, 6 to 5, something like that. This week it was 7 to 6. So that means that they drew 1.2 million together. So it seems like wrestling in general was just on the up. So that's good for both, and that's really good for NXT to draw that many because I feel when they were losing, they weren't just like, it didn't just flip-flop, but they were in the 400,000 a few weeks ago, and they got up to 700,000 this week.
Yeah, they almost doubled. Across the board, it's usually been AEW up 100,000 to NXT. So I think it'll go back to normal. I think AEW is just going to keep running with it. So, I think you're right. It's the go-home show. But I will say this. From what I've watched I watched the whole Dynamite last night. I didn't get a chance to watch all of NXT just yet. From what I got to watch, I thought AEW was still a better show. I haven't seen the triple threat match yet, though.
Yes. So. I guess, because I guess with AEW, the fact that, again, we're wrestling in front of nobody, I kind of like the go-home show aspect because of the fact that we saw more press conferences and more kind of less matches. I actually enjoy the less matches because it seems like, it seems like a go-home show where they're building things up, but it's less meaningless matches and more meaningful matches and meaningful promotions.
Yeah.
We didn't just, have nobody's in action for no reason at all. Everything seemed to have a purpose. Who do you think is going to win? Let's just say night 2. Let's forget night 1 because that could probably go either way. Let's look at night number 2. Fyter Fest night number 2, Great American Bash night number 2. Who are you taking? That's championship match against championship match. Which brand is going to draw the best that night, July the 8th?
I think it's going to be AEW. That's just me. I think AEW is going to the 2-week stretch. They're going to sweep.
You think you're going to sweep?
Yep. I'm pretty darn sure about that. I think AEW is the best thing going right now. NXT is second, but I think it's still going to be about 100,000 difference. I think next week and the following week you're going to see AEW win. I'm going to say by about it'll still be kind of close, but it'll be like 100,000 like they normally do. So it'll be like a normal show, I think. 100,000 different.
While we're at it, let's break down who do you see going over. I have the NXT Fyter Fest night number 1 card in front of me. You got the Jurassic Express versus MJF and Wardlow. Who do you like in that match?
It's going to be MJF and Wardlow. I think MJF he's his money. And Wardlow's money too. I love Jurassic Express. I think Jungle Boy Jack, he's got a great future ahead of him. I love Luchasaurus. It was good to see Luchasaurus and Wardlow get in the ring this past week. I've been waiting for it. It was a good match, lumberjack match too. So yeah, it's tough. It's splitting hairs, but I think the MJF factors in, and I think MJF and Wardlow are going to win.
Kairo Shida versus Penelope Ford for the women's championship. Who you got?
Shida's winning, no question. She's on fire. Penelope Ford's good, but I think Shida's gonna win.
Omega and Paige defend their AEW Tag Championships against Best Friends.
Ooh, I'm gonna say Best Friends. I'm gonna go with the upset. I think they're due. They haven't won a major tag team title any promotion, I believe. So it'll be cool to see them get it. And I see a little friction happening between Omega and Hangman. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a little issue between them, and then Best Friends capitalizes and then wins the titles.
The main event probably next week is going to be Cody Rhodes versus Jack Hager for the AEW TNT Championship. Who's leaving there with the TNT Championship?
I think they keep it on Cody. I think it wouldn't make sense to have him drop the belt as quickly as as he could. I don't think a loss in a good match is going to hurt Hager. I just think he could take an L and still be fine. He's already taken an L to Mox, and Hager hasn't stumbled or anything. So I think another loss for Cody would hurt him, I believe.
So next week you got the Great American Bash, you got Fyter Fest, you got that for the next 2 weeks. I'm hoping, yet again, we saw within your house, they did a great job. NXT, regardless if I'm watching you live or taped, I hope you pull out the same card that you did for TakeOver in the sense of just it was all around awesomeness of retro. And then Great American Bash has got a lot of history to it as well. So just like in your house, maybe even more history to it. I personally attended a Great American Bash back in the day when I saw the last match ever of Muhammad Hassan against The Undertaker. At the time, it was number one contender who was going to fight JBL for the championship at SummerSlam. It was obviously The Undertaker won the match, and we never saw Muhammad Hassan again. And the main event, Batista. Actually, no, correction. Yeah, it was Batista bringing over his World Heavyweight Championship from Monday Night Raw, facing JBL, who just had gone through the feud with John Cena for the SmackDown Championship, now trying to go after Batista for now the World Heavyweight title. And Batista left Great American Bash with the World Heavyweight Championship as well. That was the return, the WWE version of Great American Bash. Would you rather see these pay-per-views, this In Your House, the Great American Bash, any of these actually used as regular pay-per-views, or do you like the way that they're doing it? Personally, I don't understand why we're doing Great American Bash as kind of like an NXT event, or In Your House an NXT event. Why aren't we doing these as WWE? You know, who is really that invested in the Extreme Rules pay-per-view? Yeah. Not saying that the Great American Bash pay-per-view, I guess, I guess what I'm trying to say is what we learned with the NXT pay-per-view is that somebody like myself will tune in just for the fact that I want to see how they're going to do the set, what they're going to do with the throwback stuff, ring aprons. So that alone should be a reason why WWE is cashing in on these old events, why Extreme Rules should be called, maybe, I don't know, In Your House Extreme Rules or Great American Bash. They should be doing, Halloween Havoc should definitely be one that they are using. I don't understand why they're using Starrcade as like a live network event when they could be using that as a regular pay-per-view. I don't understand what's being minded.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, the Starrcade, for example, that you just mentioned, that should be a pay-per-view all in itself. Great American Bash, I agree, it should be it should be its own pay-per-view. It should be a standalone that on a Sunday night for the main event, for the main roster. That's I'm okay with it at this point. I think WWE's doing it a little bit of a jab at the Rhodes crew and AEW. I think that's what it really comes down to. They're not going to say that, but let's be honest. The writing's on the wall. It kind of makes sense to me.
One of the females that was upset by that, the Rhodes sister, said in a tweet that WWE should be sending her mother, Dusty Rhodes' wife, some money for the fact that they are obviously using the Great American Bash trademark. Kind of a little upset by that. But believe me, there are a lot more females out there that are more upset, not just about people using trademarks and stuff like that. I have the list in front of me, this new speaking out movement, because it seems like right now in the world just everything is happening. And some of the things that have happened in the past, Black Lives Matter happened at one time. It came right back. We had Me Too at one time, and now we have speaking out, which is essentially the same thing. Seems a little more focused on wrestling, despite the fact that I see it being used against Justin Bieber and some other people in the mainstream celebrity world. But when it comes to wrestling, it definitely has been much bigger than Me Too was when it comes to wrestling. It seems to maybe have taken the ownership of that form of entertainment because there is a lot of names. I'll try to get through them right now. You got Jim Cornette, you got Matt Riddle, you got Velveteen Dream, Austin Theory, Darby Allin, Mike Quackenbush, who is one of the head people down at Chikara, which is getting a lot of flack because Chikara has had a bunch of names on this list. A lot of people have quit and left Chikara because of what's going on down there. You got Marty Scurll, somebody who I like personally. You have the Knight family, who, if you don't know the Knight family, that's Paige. That's her family and the promotion they run in England. Other names on the list, David Christ, Sammy Guevara. We'll obviously talk about that one in a second. Will Ospreay. Some other names you recognize on the list, Jimmy Havoc, Trent Seven, Jordan Devlin, Jack Gallagher, and finally, rounding things up, Justin Roberts, Joey Ryan, who is definitely one of the biggest names mentioned on this list, and James Ellsworth. Obviously, the allegations go all over the road here. There's even more names on this list. Some people maybe I'm not so familiar with, but more importantly, what do you make of this list? If you're an owner of a company right now, and let's say you got 5 names on this list, what are you doing?
I'm doing what AEW did with Sammy Guevara. I'm sending him home. I'm suspending him indefinitely and trying to do the most thorough investigation that you can and just kind of sit back and see what happens. You also have Jimmy Havoc with AEW as well. Jimmy Havoc's actually going to rehab, so he's.
Justin Roberts was just ring announcing on last night's show. Yeah. He was, a lot of these. I guess the big issue is this is a long list of names, but I mean, what they're doing varies from person to person. That's why I didn't even get into it. I mean, It's just allegations of people like being full on coming on to people while, people doing a lot more inappropriate things. You mentioned while we were off air that Terry Reynolds has come out and said that Brock Lesnar flashed her. That's not exactly what Justin Roberts did. He just kind of sent some text messages to a female saying, suggesting that she send him some pictures, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of names, and Joey Ryan obviously was somebody who was mentioned quite a bit. I've seen him actually mentioned a lot as well. There's even been some comedians. Chris D'Elia has been accused. Justin Bieber has been accused. That one guy that Justin Bieber, but he was in The Fault of Our Stars and some other of those kind of teen dramas. He's been accused. But it's just crazy. Sammy Guevara, do you think that it's fair, though, that a lot of these things are coming out so far later? What Sammy Guevara said is not appropriate. But I guess my thing is I want to live in a society where this isn't necessarily something that comes out every 4 years where we just bring out a whole list of names and we just kind of deal with it as it happens. Because if we deal with it as it happens, then it's much more – it gets right to the source of that person. They're not just a name on a list that comes out years later. We can deal with that event right then and there. Sammy Guevara could have been suspended or taken care of in the wrestling world back then when he mentioned those comments about Sasha Banks, and we could be past it now.
Yeah, I'll say this. It's a very hot button issue. You're going to ruffle feathers either way you go. The reason why you can't, they're not going to come. These things aren't going to happen in the moment. As if these things did happen, these individuals were, they're traumatized. You know what I mean? So it could take time for them to figure everything out and do it. But on the other end of it, if you're looking at it the other perspective, it's like Matt Riddle just got called up, and now you're doing this. So you got to walk a fine line because you got to try to filter what you think is really true and what really isn't true. And in smoke, it's really tough because, I don't know, man. It's just it's a hard thing to talk about because you're going to ruffle feathers regardless. I think some of it is false. I'm not going to go into details on which ones I think are not. That's a conversation for another time. But there's some situations I think that seem more legitimate than others, and I think others are just looking for their 5 minutes of fame or to take down a talent. Now, I'll talk about the Sammy G thing, Sammy Guevara, that whole situation. It was from 4 years ago. He was, 22 at the time? He's still an adult. That's something you don't say. You don't say things like that. You can have the hots for an individual and, say it in a different way. I think Sammy's learned from it. He's taken these sensitivity trainings that, sessions that are going on. So I wish him the best, and Sasha's already forgiven him. So if Sasha's good with it, then let's have Sammy get the class work done and pass an evaluation from AEW, and then we'll see if Tony brings him back. Because I think Tony Khan's doing a great job across the board. He's very supportive of all these different movements. So I think Tony Khan's done a better job than Vince McMahon. That's just me. So I don't know what you think about it, but
it's reasons like this as well that add this to the COVID, and maybe, WWE is not going to do it. But I think with the fact that it's summertime anyways, and outside of SummerSlam itself, I feel that wrestling ratings, or just television ratings in general, a lot of times go down in the summer months because people go outside. And there's not concerts and sporting events for us to all go outside to. But the fact that, during the month of July, I just think with this going on, with the COVID thing going on, there would never be a better month in the history of professional wrestling to just shut things down. Maybe do those 2 weeks of Fyter Fest, do those 2 weeks of Great American Bash, and then Extreme Rules, for example, is just an event to me that doesn't need to happen. We don't need to be hyping up to Extreme Rules. We can just put things on the kibosh. You're not going to have to give anybody their ticket money back because it's not in front of a live audience. You don't have any house shows scheduled. And obviously with the COVID cases going up in the state of Florida and people, being told that they can't, if they leave, they can't come back to Florida. If they are in Florida, they can't go back to their homes in New York and vice versa. Yeah. There's just never a better time with, sports getting out of Florida because everything's so bad down there. And with all of this happening, like with the Sammy Guevaras of the world, never been a better time to just shut down the world of professional wrestling for a good month.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Let's shut things down. Let's get everybody healthy and let's get fans back in the arenas. That's the goal.
Yes. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of the show. For Brandon the Icebreaker Clements, you find him on Twitter at Icebreaker21. Myself at K-Rock Jared. Find the show on Twitter at Heel to the Face. Once again, we are on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spreaker.com under the Heel to the Face, SoundCloud, visually on YouTube, and probably some more that I don't even know about. But either way, we will talk to you next time. We'll talk Great American Bash. We'll talk Fyter Fest. This has been the Heel to the Face podcast.